Buying a business can be an incredible path to financial independence and entrepreneurial success, but it can also be an expensive disaster if you make critical mistakes along the way. We've seen countless buyers over the years, some who build thriving enterprises from their acquisitions, and others who lose their life savings on businesses that looked good on paper but turned into nightmares. The difference between these outcomes often comes down to avoiding a handful of common but costly mistakes. Today, we're walking through the biggest errors buyers make when purchasing businesses in Australia. Mistakes that can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, years of stress, or complete business failure. Whether you're a first-time buyer or adding to your portfolio, understanding these pitfalls will help you navigate the acquisition process with confidence and avoid the traps that catch so many others. The first major mistake is falling in love with a business before you've done proper due diligence. This happens more often than you might think. You walk into a beautiful cafe with great atmosphere and imagine yourself as the owner serving customers. You visit a successful gym and picture yourself running it. You see a profitable tradie business and envision the lifestyle it could provide. Emotional attachment clouds judgment. When you fall in love with a business, you start rationalizing problems away. Sure, the revenue's been declining, but that's just because the current owner is checked out. I'll turn that around. Or yes, the lease is expensive, but the location is perfect. That premium is worth it. You become an advocate for the purchase instead of an objective evaluator. This emotional investment makes you vulnerable to overpaying, accepting unfavorable terms, or overlooking serious red flags. Sellers and brokers can sense when a buyer is emotionally committed, and they use that leverage in negotiations. You lose your walkaway power when you've already decided emotionally that you must have this business. The solution is maintaining emotional discipline throughout the process. Yes, you need to be genuinely interested in the business, but interest isn't the same as love. Approach every business as a financial investment first, lifestyle choice second. Have objective criteria and stick to them. Be willing to walk away from any deal, no matter how attractive it seems on surface level. Look at multiple businesses simultaneously. This comparison shopping keeps you objective and prevents fixation on one opportunity. If you're only looking at one business, you naturally want it to work out, because you've invested time and energy. If you're evaluating 3 or 4 options, you can be more dispassionate about each one. Remember, there will always be another business opportunity. The perfect business for you might be the one you haven't found yet. Don't force a mediocre opportunity just because you're emotionally attached or impatient to become a business owner. The second critical mistake is rushing or skimping on due diligence. This might be the most expensive error buyers make. Due diligence is your protection. It's where you verify everything the seller has claimed and uncover problems before they become your problems. Some buyers rush due diligence because they're afraid of losing the deal to another buyer. The seller says, "I have other interested parties," and you panic, cutting corners to move faster. Sometimes buyers are just impatient to take ownership and start their new venture. Other times they don't want to spend money on thorough professional reviews. Accountants, lawyers, industry specialists, whatever the reason, inadequate due diligence leads to nasty surprises after purchase. You discover that the financials were creatively presented, that major customers are leaving, that equipment needs immediate expensive replacement, that the lease has problematic terms, that there are regulatory compliance issues, that key employees are planning to quit. Proper due diligence takes time, typically 2 to 4 weeks minimum, longer for complex businesses. Don't let sellers pressure you to rush. If the seller is unwilling to provide reasonable time for proper investigation, that's itself a red flag. Good businesses with honest sellers don't need artificial urgency. Invest in professional help during due diligence. Engage a qualified business accountant to review and verify financials. Have them analyze the bank statements, not just the profit and loss statements the seller provides. Bank statements show actual cash flow and are much harder to manipulate. Your accountant should verify revenue claims, identify unusual expenses or aggressive add-backs, and assess the sustainability of reported profits. Use an experienced commercial lawyer to review all contracts, the purchase agreement obviously, but also the lease, supplier contracts, customer agreements, employment contracts, franchise agreements if applicable. Lawyers spot problematic terms that buyers often miss. That lease clause about rent increases, or the supplier contract that's non-transferable, or the employment agreement that triggers large payouts on change of ownership. For businesses with significant equipment or inventory, have specialists inspect them. Don't just accept the seller's representation that everything works fine. Equipment near the end of its life or inventory that's obsolete can represent tens or hundreds of thousands in immediate costs after purchase. Verify everything the seller tells you. Check that licenses and permits are current and transferable. Confirm customer and supplier relationships by speaking with them if possible. Visit the business multiple times at different days and times to verify traffic and activity. Check online reviews and reputation. Search for any legal issues or complaints. The money you spend on thorough due diligence, perhaps $5,000 to $15,000 for professional advisors, is cheap insurance against a $300,000 mistake. Or it gives you the confidence to walk away from a bad deal before you're committed. Either outcome makes the investment worthwhile. Mistake number 3 is accepting the seller's adjusted or normalized financials without critical analysis. Almost every business for sale comes with adjusted profit calculations where the seller adds back various expenses to show higher profitability than the official financial statements report. Some adjustments are completely legitimate if the owner pays themselves an above-market salary of $200,000 when market rate for the role is $100,000. Adding back that $100,000 excess is reasonable. You wouldn't need to pay yourself that much. If the owner runs personal expenses through the business, their car, mobile phone, home office, adding those back makes sense because you wouldn't have those costs. But sellers often get creative with add-backs, and inexperienced buyers accept them without question. We add back $50,000 for the owner's time because the new owner could run this with less involvement. Really, if the business actually requires significant owner involvement, that time has value. You can't just pretend it doesn't exist. Or, we add back $30,000 in marketing expenses because that level of marketing isn't necessary. Maybe, but reducing marketing might also reduce revenue. You can't assume you can cut costs without affecting income. Every add back should be scrutinized. Is it genuinely a one-off expense that won't recur? Is it truly discretionary? Could removing it impact business performance? Here's the key test. Look at the bank statements and actual tax returns, not just the adjusted figures. Bank statements show what really happened. If the business claims $250,000 in profit after add-backs, but the bank statements show only $150,000 flowing through, where's the disconnect? Maybe those add-backs were aggressive. Maybe there are costs not being disclosed. Tax returns are also telling. While sellers often legitimately minimize tax through legal strategies, there should be reasonable correlation between what they report to the ATO and what they claim to you. If they're telling the tax office the business makes $100,000, but telling you it makes $250,000 after add-backs, dig very deep into those adjustments. Work with your accountant to verify every add-back. Ask for documentation supporting each adjustment. Don't accept vague categories like discretionary expenses. What specifically are these? Get the bank statements for 12 to 24 months and reconcile them against the reported financials. This is tedious work, but absolutely critical. Remember that you're buying the business's actual performance, not the theoretical performance the seller calculates. Be conservative. If you're uncertain about an add-back, don't count it. Better to be pleasantly surprised by better than expected performance than shocked by worse than promised results. The fourth major mistake is failing to properly evaluate the lease for location-based businesses. For retail, hospitality, or any business operating from commercial premises, the lease is often as important as the business itself, yet many buyers give it cursory attention, focusing primarily on the business financials. First question, how much time remains on the lease and what are the renewal options? A business with only 1 year left on the lease and no guaranteed renewal is extremely risky. What happens if the landlord won't renew or wants to triple the rent? Your business could become worthless overnight. You need either substantial remaining lease term, ideally 5+ years, or very strong renewal options built into the lease. Second, what are the rent and outgoings and how do they compare to market rates? If the business is paying significantly above market rent, that's a hidden cost eating into profitability. You might be buying a marginal business that could be much more profitable with better lease terms, but you're stuck with the current agreement. Third, is the lease actually assignable to you? Many buyers assume they'll just take over the lease, but landlord approval is usually required. Some landlords are difficult, requiring extensive financial disclosures, personal guarantees, or bank guarantees. Some simply won't approve new tenants they don't know. Get landlord approval in writing as a condition of purchase. Don't assume it'll be fine. Fourth, what are the lease terms about permitted use, signage, operating hours, fit-out requirements? Can you actually operate the business as you intend under the lease restrictions? Can you make the changes you're planning? Read the entire lease carefully with your lawyer. Leases are complex legal documents with implications you might miss. Terms about rent reviews, renewal conditions, early termination, maintenance responsibilities, outgoings calculations, all of these affect your business viability and profitability. For some businesses, you might want to negotiate a new lease rather than just assigning the old one, especially if the existing lease has unfavourable terms or is near expiry. This takes longer but could save you significantly over time. Mistake number 5 is underestimating the capital you'll need beyond the purchase price. Many buyers drain their resources to maximise the purchase, leaving themselves no buffer for the inevitable unexpected costs and working capital needs. First, there are transaction costs, legal fees, accounting fees, broker fees if you're using a buyer's agent, stock take costs, establishment costs. These typically run 5 to 10% of purchase price. On a $400,000 business, that's $20,000 to $40,000 you need beyond the purchase price. Then there's working capital. Most businesses need cash to operate. Paying suppliers before customers pay you, covering payroll during slow periods, maintaining inventory, handling deposits and bonds. You need sufficient working capital from day one, but many buyers don't factor this in. They spend everything on the purchase and have nothing left to actually run the business. Equipment replacement or repairs often hit immediately after purchase. The seller has been deferring maintenance or running equipment into the ground, knowing they're selling. Suddenly you own it, and that commercial oven or delivery van or computer system needs expensive repair or replacement. Business improvements you're planning also require capital. Maybe you want to refresh the fit-out, upgrade the website, invest in marketing. These aren't free. Having capital available for strategic investments helps you grow the business instead of just maintaining it. Here's a good rule of thumb. Have at least 20 to 30% of the purchase price available beyond what you spend on the purchase itself. On a $500,000 business, that means having $100,000 to $150,000 in accessible capital after the purchase completes. This buffer protects you from immediate crises and funds the first few months of operations while you learn the business. Don't max out every funding source just to buy a bigger business. Better to buy a slightly smaller business that you can afford to operate properly than overextend yourself on a larger one and struggle from day one with capital constraints. The 6th critical mistake is failing to plan and execute a proper transition. Too many buyers focus entirely on getting to settlement, treating that as the finish line. In reality, settlement is the starting line. What happens in the first weeks and months after you take ownership largely determines your success. Start transition planning before settlement. Discuss with the seller what the handover period will look like. How many hours will they commit? What specifically will you cover? Who needs to be introduced? Key customers? Critical suppliers? Employees? Landlord? Professional advisors? Negotiate adequate handover time in the purchase agreement. For a simple business, maybe 2 weeks is sufficient. For complex operations, you might need 4 to 6 weeks of seller involvement. Some businesses benefit from part-time seller involvement over several months. Be realistic about how long you'll need their knowledge and support. During handover, be a sponge. Shadow the seller intensively. Learn not just the formal procedures, but the informal knowledge. How to handle difficult customers. Which supplier to call when you need rush service. Which employee has which strengths. How to troubleshoot common problems. This tribal knowledge isn't written down anywhere, but it's invaluable. Meet personally with key stakeholders. Customers need reassurance about continuity. I've bought this business because I believe in it. Nothing's changing except who signs the checks. The quality and service you've come to expect will continue. This personal touch prevents customer flight in the critical transition period. Meet employees one-on-one. Understand their concerns. Reassure them about job security where appropriate. Learn what they think works well and what could be improved. Employees have insights the seller might not share, especially about operational problems or inefficiencies. Don't make dramatic changes immediately. You need time to understand why things work the way they do before changing them. That inefficient process might actually be solving a problem you don't yet understand. That unnecessary employee might be doing critical work that's not obvious. Spend at least 30 to 90 days learning and observing before implementing major changes. Have a 90-day plan. What will you focus on in your first 3 months? Usually the priorities are learning operations thoroughly, maintaining performance and customer service, building relationships with stakeholders, identifying quick wins, small improvements that can happen without major disruption, save big strategic changes for after you truly understand the business. Expect a performance dip in the transition period. It's normal for revenue to soften slightly or operations to be somewhat less efficient while you're learning. Budget for this and don't panic. The goal is steady improvement, not perfection from day one. The seventh and potentially most costly mistake is ignoring or rationalizing red flags. In the excitement of buying a business and the desire to make it work, buyers often talk themselves into overlooking serious warning signs. Declining revenue is a huge red flag. If sales have dropped 15 or 20% over the past 2 years, that's not just market fluctuation, something is wrong. Maybe customer preferences changed, a new competitor emerged, the location declined, or quality issues drove customers away. Don't assume you'll magically reverse this trend. Declining businesses require turnaround expertise, which is very different from operating a healthy business. Customer or supplier concentration is another major warning. If 1 or 2 customers represent 50% or more of revenue, what happens if they leave after you buy the business? Do they have loyalty to the seller personally? Will they stay with you? Similarly, if you're dependent on 1 or 2 suppliers with no alternatives, you have no negotiating power and massive vulnerability. Seller evasiveness or reluctance to provide information should immediately concern you. If the seller won't share customer lists or provide bank statements or allow proper due diligence. Why? Usually because they're hiding something. Walk away from sellers who won't be transparent. High employee turnover suggests management or cultural problems. If staff constantly leave, that's expensive in recruitment and training costs, but more importantly, it indicates something wrong with the work environment, compensation, or leadership. You'll inherit these problems. Regulatory or compliance issues are serious. Outstanding violations, disputes with authorities, failure to maintain required licenses, these create legal and financial liability that becomes yours at settlement. Make sure all compliance matters are resolved before purchasing. The seller's reason for selling sometimes rings false. I want to retire from a 45-year-old. New opportunities that they won't describe. Health reasons for someone who seems perfectly healthy. Dig into the real reason. Often there's an underlying problem. Maybe a major customer is leaving, the lease won't renew, or a competitive threat is emerging. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate thoroughly. Don't rationalize concerns away. The deal that seems too good to be true usually is. Better to walk away from a questionable opportunity than buy a problem. Buying a business successfully requires avoiding these 7 critical mistakes. Maintain emotional discipline rather than falling in love prematurely. Conduct thorough due diligence even when it's time-consuming and expensive. Critically analyze adjusted financials instead of accepting them at face value. Properly evaluate the lease for location-based businesses. Ensure adequate capital for transaction costs, working capital, and contingencies. Plan and execute a comprehensive transition and never ignore red flags or warning signs. Yes, this cautious approach might mean walking away from some opportunities. You might take longer to find the right business. You'll spend more on professional advisors and due diligence. But the alternative, rushing into a purchase that becomes a financial disaster, is far more costly in money, time, and stress. The buyers who succeed are those who approach acquisition systematically, maintain objectivity, do proper homework, and aren't afraid to walk away when something doesn't feel right. Buy the right business for the right reasons at the right price with proper preparation, and you set yourself up for success. Rush in emotionally with inadequate investigation, and you're gambling with your financial future. For more insights on buying and selling businesses in Australia, visit offmarketgroup.com.au.